Hello and welcome to the No Balls Podcast. I'm your host Patrick McDonald. With me, co-host Sheldon Kaufman. Today is the continuation of the NBA preseason show, where we give every team their own episode, where we talk about their upcoming season and we discuss their off season. Today it starts the last division. We're in the final stretch here. The Golden State Warriors. We'll have this division left, and then the Western Conference predictions. And then that should do it for most of our NBA preseason stuff. We'll definitely have in-season episodes, obviously, but we'll talk about that in the East episode. Golden State, it's been an interesting couple seasons with them. They won the ring, it feels like yesterday, but this team right now is completely different. Or the 24 team was completely different from the 23 team that couldn't win road games at all they couldn't win road games in that year. And then this season they were really weird too. They've had the two timelines thing for a couple of years now. Any other Warriors comments before we get started? Because I think this has been one of the more weird good teams in a while.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of different teams over some of the seasons. Um, Talking about when Curry got hurt and they were one of the worst teams in the league, and then they they're did they end up winning since then or no? Did they
Yeah,
ever
they
win
won.
after Curry?
So they had the
Oh,
year where
okay,
they
yeah,
had the
that's what I
year
thought.
where Clay was out for the season. Like
Yeah,
they knew that going into it. And then Curry got hurt after like 5 games. And
yeah,
then it was Draymond like leading a team of like really nobodies. Like it was
yeah. I
D'Lo.
remember, and then they got James
D'Lo was
Wiseman,
on
and
that
everyone
team.
thought,
Yeah, D'Lo was
yeah,
on that team. It's hard to even think. It was like the 2019 Warriors minus Durant, minus Klay Thompson, and minus Steph Curry, and then they just have D'Angelo Russell there.
yeah,
Like they have the bad depth of the Dynasty Warriors without having their three best players probably from that run. Draymond Green not being very effective that year because he was also hurt a lot. No DeMarcus Cousins. Um,
mm,
yeah, that was a weird Warriors year. Anyway, let's talk about the 24 year, which wouldn't be my standards as weird. But you know, 30. We'll just start with the records: 43 and 36, 10th in the West. Play and loss, 0 for 10 in the elimination game, as everybody will bring up. Um, 47 and 35 expected record, so pretty much in line with their actual record. 21 and 20 at home, and then 25 and 16 on the road, so they clearly improved year to year winning on the road, which was a big thing for them in 23. Pre All Star break, 27 and 26. Post All Star break, 19 and 10. So they really turned it on at the end of the season. I think simultaneously the Rockets were also really turning it on at the end of the season, trying to push for that last play-in spot. Um, they ended up getting the upper hand there. They ended up pulling it out. Um, Overall, versus the East, I had them at 20 and 10, and then versus the West, they were 26 and 26. So I really played well against the West, but not against against the East, but about 500 against the West. In clutch games, they were 24 and 24, and then in other games, they were 22 and 12. So they were on the other side of blowouts a little bit more, and they were about average in clutch play. Um, Anything on this 2014 before we get into their offense and defense?
yeah. It was pretty fun. We saw the emergence of the rookie Brandon Podensky, and we saw a breakout year from Kaminga as well. I think
I agree.
really interesting stuff. But let's get into the numbers, Pat.
Yeah. Um, Overall, 2.4 net rating, ranked 13th last season. So, you know, this probably should have been one of the top teams in the NBA last season. They ended up being the 10th seed in the Western Conference. I think they were a tad better than a couple of the teams ahead of them, net rating wise, but they were seated about where they were expected with their net rating. Um, Offense, 116.9 offensive rating, ranked ninth in the league last season. Defense, 114.5 defensive rating, ranked 15th. They were a pretty solid unit on both sides of the floor. Typically, what I like to say is contenders, you want a top 10 in both units. They weren't too far off from that. I would say a playoff team is typically very similar to this Warriors team, top 10 in one of them and top 20 in the other one. So this definitely could have been a playoff team last season. Just a little unfortunate that it wasn't. Breaking down their offense, like we said, ninth ranked, 27th in transition offense.
Wow.
Not very good. They were aging a little bit. Um, and they could have definitely been a little bit better with some of the younger players that they had last year, like Kuminga. You think of as like I think NBA they made a post about the highest jumps in game, and I think he had like 3 or 4 of the top 10. Like
Yeah.
he's that good of an athlete. Um, but either way, they were only 27th. Again, Curry, Paul, Clay, Draymond, Looney's not running the floor.
Yeah.
They were an older team. We get into the half court, 18th in pick and roll ball handler efficiency, 48th percentile, 26th frequency. So they're not running a ton of these possessions, at least, is the big thing with them. They weren't very efficient at it. They were about average. Think about what they had last season. It felt like they had Curry and no other great offensive players. Um, we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's kind of what it felt like last season. 25th in roll efficiency, 22nd in frequency, 19th or 17th percentile. Um, they really struggled here. 25th, like I said, Looney, it just felt like he lost like 4 years of age in one season. Um, he wasn't ever really too great here. He's a 6'9" big, like he's a little undersized. He's mainly been known as a rebounder in his career and a rim protector as well. But I think they found something with their one of their rookies that really helps them here. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. 17th percentile there. 26th in post efficiency, 16th frequency, 14th percentile. I actually didn't know they ran this many post ups. Um, for me, I would think some of this has to do with um, some of their split actions might get logged as post ups because they pass the ball to the high post to initiate some of these. I'm not sure if that's the case, but that would also say that their split game has gotten a lot worse, which I didn't feel like it did in the season. Um, for me, it felt like they were just a tick worse, not this much worse. But that could also have some of their post up numbers also put into there, being a little bit worse. Sneakily, too, Klay Thompson, like weirdly, as in throughout his career, like gets a good amount of post ups, like for off ball wing.
Yeah.
Um, he was not good at them really since he's been back from injury. Um, Yeah. Other than that, third in isolation efficiency, 26th frequency, 93rd percentile. This is where they really shined. Um, this is kind of where you want to be with isolation efficiency. You want to be really efficient, but not run a ton of them, because then that leaves you more plays to run the more efficient offense. Which this is really how I feel that Golden State had an efficient offense. Is they were good when they did run isolation, but they didn't run a ton of it. So they're getting more efficient shots other places, but when they have to do it, they're getting good results. Additionally, fourth in offensive rebounding, that'll give you a slight boost. You get more possessions than some of the other teams. Seventh in 3-point percentage, um, good shooting team. Fourth in attempts, really good stuff. second in pull up three percentage, and 11th in 3 point attempts pull up. That has some to do with the isolation efficiency that they were really solid with. Um, it really kind of saved their offense last season. As they start to get a lot of these younger guys implemented, they don't really know the system as well as some of their veterans that they had played previously. They could just fit into the Golden State system that previously had been amazing. Any offensive notes to make here for you?
Um, I mean, you kind of touched on a lot of it. One thing I do want to bring up is that 3 point shooting, just really good stuff. Obviously, they have Steph Curry, but another guy I want to point out is Brandon Padinsky. Um, I'm sure you saw the report where they want him to take 7 to 8 threes next year, and I think this is a guy that, I mean, 7 to 8 threes is kind of crazy to ask for of a guy going into year two, but I mean, he shot 38% last year. Um, big contributor to those numbers from the 3 point line and pull up shooting. He's a very, I'm sure we're going to talk about him a lot during this episode, but yeah, very. I would wanted to highlight him real quick, and yeah, this offense definitely looked just like you said, a tick behind. Like Curry just looked a little bit like not like Curry. Everyone just like looked a little bit off. Um, but I mean, I still think this is. I mean, obviously, this is still a really good offense. Like you said, the isolation numbers are really good because you have some of the best isolation players in the game. Um, just a lot of good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned it. I think it kind of went a little unnoticed last year. Curry was maybe a step worse than he had been before. Um, since he bulked up a couple seasons ago, um, like once he had gotten hurt, he bulked up a little bit to protect himself a little bit more. His shooting's gotten a
Yeah.
little bit worse since then. Um, but he's still Steph Curry, right? Like even more than just his 3 point shooting, like he's a really good rim finisher still. It helps their offense so much, uh, just to have him like be one of the best shot makers ever. Um, and they relied on him to do that a lot last year. Um, Kept it afloat, I would say. Um, and some of the other guys have good isolation qualities, but it's not a top unit in the league. I wouldn't say what you would think, but they got good results. Mainly because I think when you don't run it a lot, um, you know, you're not getting the bad possessions of it a little bit. It's hard to explain what that means, but as you increase the quality or the quantity, the quality won't always be better. And we'll get into that. I think you had just mentioned the 3 point attempts with pods. That is a part of it, but um, yeah, going forward, their defense, like I said, 15th ranked, 20 or 25th in transition defense. Again, they struggled a little bit. They're getting older. They're really needing to play that second timeline a little bit more now. That's what it looks like. Ninth in pick and roll ball handler defense, 24th frequency, 72nd percentile. So they're pretty solid defending this action. They're not defending it a ton. Um, you would want to defend it a little bit more. It's a perimeter attempt. 13th in roll defense, 17th in frequency, 59th percentile. Um, Very solid unit here. I like to always say pick and roll is how you evaluate the good team defenses. And the next two sections we look at are more of their individual defenders. Yet they did very solid and in the guarding the pick and roll. Good stuff. I mean, a lot of these guys had played together forever. If not, it's Chris Paul, like very, very intelligent player of the ball. The rookies that they brought in and the younger players that they brought in are really good athletes. And they haven't rushed really any of them into a bunch of playing time besides the guy who they're really high on, Brandon Pajemski. And he's an awesome defender, at least a really, really awesome team defender. Um,
Yeah.
And then, yeah, that's kind of why that this is the thing here. Uh, Post up seventh in post up defense, third in post frequency, 79th percentile. They're not bad here. They're actually pretty solid, 79th percentile. You'd like the frequency to be a little bit lower just because these are still efficient shots, even if you're defending them better than other teams defend them. They're still the more efficient shots in basketball. A lot of the reason teams attack them is because there's a lot of minutes in the game where their back or their front court is Draymond Green and Kuminga, or it's Draymond Green and Wiggins, and it's a small um, it's a small lineup, and especially in the West where there's a ton of teams that play double big and a lot of teams that run through their centers, you're going to get posted up a ton. Um, I think that does play in effect that they were really good against the East and not as good against the West.
Yeah.
Um, Isolation defense, they were 12th with 15th frequency. They were 62nd percentile. Yeah, they're guarding pretty well. I think they have decent individual defenders on this team. Um, you know, Wiggins, Pods, Draymond, like I think those are all very solid defenders. I talked about it in the Mavericks episode. I think Klay Thompson's a little washed on that end, but Steve Kerr kind of knows that, so he would give him the right matchups, right? He wouldn't just say, "Hey, Klay Thompson, in 2017, you could guard this guy. We're gonna still throw you on him." Like
Yeah.
Steve Kerr's a good coach. He knows what he's doing, and I don't know. I think he got a ton of hate for his Olympic decisions, and it led him to stepping down. I don't necessarily know if that was needed, but at least there's some good options behind him because Spolstra and Missoula, whoever you pick, is a good option. 10th in defensive rebounding. They were ending possessions last season. Anything on their defense scheme, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, they also had Gary Payton last year, who's been on good on ball defender his whole career. Um, like you said, it just if you look at the starting lineup, it's a lot of age and it's a lot of already shaky on defense guys. You add in the age and athleticism, it doesn't get any better on that side of the ball. Um, but yeah, like you said, might have to play the second line a little bit more in certain situations. And just for the scheme part, I mean, I think another thing I wanted to mention is that they do love to run that Draymond at the five small ball a lot. Um, which I did like. That's going to be a pro that, like you said, they're going to post up on you when you have those two big centers, which a lot of teams run in the West, right? Um, just some of the offense, just one big defensive scheme thing I noticed was that just kind of when they do go to that small ball five, Draymond kind of acts as like a free safety in the paint. Doesn't really stick to someone, kind of just lurks around, waits to get on defenders, stuff like that. And the whole defense is just very kind of switchy and just high motored at times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They just asked a ton of guys to do a ton of things out there, kind of.
Yeah.
Um, it's nothing too complicated. It's just switch most of the time. They like to hide Curry with hedges, but other than that, like standard stuff that you see out of switchable defensive teams. Looney, they would drop him previously. They didn't do it as much with Trace Jackson Davis, who was their rookie. Um, really interesting player. Um, he would play a little bit higher just because he's a little more athletic, but other than that, like it's a very simple defensive scheme. Offensively, it just feels like nobody ever has the ball too much. Um, if you've watched basketball for the last 10 years, you kind of have a glimpse of how this Warriors team plays. Um, they still play very similarly, even now. Like anybody can facilitate the ball. It's very empowering. Um, and yeah, they allow a lot of guys to get shots up. Um, and they prioritize spacing, obviously. Any other scheme notes before we go forward?
I mean, like you said, they've been doing all the same stuff for a while. Um, I mean, it's just fun to watch Curry off ball and what they do for him. Just a lot of screens just to get him in space. And he just moves. He never runs out of energy, even being in the league for 10 plus years now. Um, yeah, like you said, a lot of spacing. Draymond Green facilitates. I think you kind of mentioned it in the like when they pass it to the high post. Um, Sometimes it's him because he's still a really good passer. Uh, yeah, that's pretty much all I got.
Yeah, very, very interesting. They've produced a lot of other NBA coaches too. Kenny Atkinson, we mentioned in Cleveland. He spent a good bit of time here. Um, Mike, we'll get into him in the Sacramento episode. Mike Green um, has been a Golden State guy. I think there's definitely another NBA coach that has been a Kerr assistant that I'm blinking on, but very good staff historically. We'll go forward to their off season. Um, I didn't have them having a draft pick. Did you have that as well? Sometimes the trades
Yeah,
don't show up.
they got they I got someone, but it was like very. I think it was like 52. Um, Hold up, give me a second. I kind of messed up my where I put the my evaluations on everyone. Yeah, Quinton Post.
Yeah,
Uh,
okay. It was a late second, so it was probably a trade that I didn't have.
yeah.
You give
You
me
want
the
me to talk to him? You want me to
yeah
talk about him? Oh,
yeah.
okay.
What'd you get on Quentin
Yeah,
Post?
so he's 7'1", from Boston College, I believe. 7'1", 245, 7'2" wingspan. So good measurements. 17 points per game last year, 8 rebounds a game, 2.9 assists. Shot 51% from the field, 43% from three. He had 1.7 blocks. Um, he has really good touch and floor spacing ability. Like I said, 43%. Lots of love there. He's also a really good passer. He can find cutters from the high post, which I think Kerr's going to love. Um, he's also good on the catch and shoot, so that floor spacing ability, like I said, it's there. And he's a pretty good rim protector, right? 1.7 blocks per game. I already mentioned the measurement, so good stuff on the defensive side as well. To improve his vert for sure is a problem, or not improve, but just some of his weaknesses. 27.5 inches, so he's a little vertically challenged. We've seen that be a problem just with people going up against high flyers, especially nowadays with a lot of wings being able to jump and even some centers in the West. Not really the best post game. He's more better in face up situations. Um, yeah, he's just slower because he's so big. He's limited to the paint. Just kind of like a defensive guy, 3 and D guy, I guess. 3 and D big. But yeah, interesting pickup.
Yeah, and what do you have on his shooting? I might have missed it.
43% from three, 51 from the field.
Oh yeah, it's right there. And on a decent amount of attempts, 170 attempts. So that's about. Oh no, that's over the past two seasons. Okay, so that's about divided by 60 games. That's about a little under three a game. So that's pretty solid volume. He's 24 years old too. Uh,
Yeah,
so
yeah, that's another thing. He's kind of old, so I mean he's pretty much reached his limit. That's right as we're speaking right now.
yeah, 2019 to 2024 is what I'm seeing here. So played five full seasons in college basketball. So he should be ready to
Hey,
play day one. I think that kind of replaces one of their big losses this offseason. We'll go forward to their addition subtractions because those, I mean, that's ultimately what this is. Um, so additions, we'll start with those. Kyle Anderson, they get from Minnesota in a sign and trade. Basically, I think it might have been a second round pick swap that they included. But Anderson, um, 3 years, 27 and a half. 6% of the cap. Very solid signing. He's an up. You know who Kyle Anderson is. He's a 6'7", 6'8" wing player with some passing ability. I really like him transitioning into the system. Um, I think he should actually be a really good fit here. I think his secondary passing is pretty interesting in Golden State. I think it's what they like to prioritize with players. Uh, Buddy Hield, big one. Everybody knows Buddy Hield because he's one of the shooters. Shooters put up points. People like looking at points per game. Very similar contract value to Anderson. Just an extra year, 4 years, 38 million essentially, 6% of the cap for most of it. There's interesting non-guarantees with this deal. Um, the I'm pretty sure the third year. Okay, so in 26, 27, which is the third year, only 3 million is guaranteed. After the draft, the deal becomes fully guaranteed. So they could cut him before the draft and only be owed 3 million. After that, the 27 season is a player option with 3.1 guaranteed if he's cut before the draft. So basically, if they were to cut him, they would owe him 3.1 million that season. If they weren't, then he would be able to opt in to that $10 million, or 3 million if he gets cut. So that's the Buddy Hield contract. It's one of the more complicated ones, but um, they brought in Buddy Hield. We know Buddy Hield, really good shooter. Next up on their additions, UDFA guy, they brought in Reese Beckman, and then they brought in a couple G League guys, Jackson Rowe and Daquan Plowden. Also, they brought in D'Anthony Melton from Philadelphia. Really interesting player. A solid defender, a good three-point shooter. They signed him to 1 year, 12 million, 9%, but it's a 1 year deal. I think Melton's really solid here. I think that's a really good ad. I'm surprised he only got a 1 year deal. And then other players, they brought in Lindy Waters from OKC. He was kind of an interesting scorer type player. Other than that, oh, and they did extend Steph Curry. They added a 1 year onto his deal. With that extension, they could have only given him one more season because during that time he's going to be over 38 years old. And there's a weird rule where if you're over 38, your contract value it can't be 4 years, kind of, is how it works.
So you can
Um,
only get a 3-year deal, pretty much.
I think that's kind of how it works. Um,
Huh.
I'm definitely not explaining it very good. Anything on their additions, Melton, Anderson, Lindy Waters, or Buddy Hield, I think is what I would
Yeah,
say.
I talked a little bit about Anderson in the Minnesota episode and kind of what he did in the playoffs. I like Anderson a lot. I think he's a good defender. Um, I think he's a decent playmaker as well. Obviously, not a guy that you need to get crazy minutes. He didn't have crazy minutes in Minnesota. He still made the use of it. Like you said, we know what we're getting there. D'Anthony Melton, I love. Right, you have defensive issues a little bit, or you don't have you have a lot of old. Your starting line is very old, right? And they're having to defend a lot. You get D'Anthony Melton, who is a really good perimeter defender, and he also can give you some scoring. Decent 3 point shooter, 36% last year, 11 points per game. And talk about shooting. We'll talk about Buddy Hield, a premier shooter in this league. Shot 38% last year. We saw how he worked with Indiana really well. Um, Unfortunately, things didn't really work out in Philly after he got traded. But I like Buddy Hield a lot. I think that in this Steve Kerr offense, I think it a much better fit for him. Um, so yeah, I like it for both sides.
Yeah. I'm interested here. Who do you think, if you had to rank those three players plus Klay Thompson right now?
Damn. Melton, Heald, and
Anderson and
Anderson and Clay.
and like where are the
Am
gaps?
I
You know what I
going off
mean?
what? Am I going off talent or like impact?
The impact. And like how
Anderson,
big do you think the gaps are? Yeah.
how good what?
How big you think the gaps are, like between the talent?
I I don't know. I I I'll go. I think Anderson just is really good. I think he actually provides impact defensively. Obviously, nothing really offensively, right? But I don't know. I mean, maybe Melton, Anderson. I think those two are interchangeable. Then I would probably go Clay Thompson.
Everybody.
Maybe, yeah, maybe Clay second. I don't know. I think I'm still high on Clay. You're not really. I just don't know how Clay's going to be in a new offense. That's just my
Yeah.
thing. I think he's going to do a
Here,
lot better.
I'll say this. I think Clay's the best of those players, but I
Okay.
think he's on these four or these three players are on the same tier as Klay Thompson as players.
Yeah. I think Clay Thompson's now or I mean, yeah, Clay Thompson's now a role player, right? Um,
Yeah.
so that's why I think he falls into this tier because these are role players. Um,
Yeah.
so that's what he is now. Yeah, he's
And the
one of the
bigger
better
loss.
ones. But
Yeah. We'll continue the losses. Obviously, we just alluded to it. They lost Klay Thompson. They lost Dario Saric. 3-point shooting big. Hopefully Quinn Post can do a little bit of that for them. Who? Let me see. I'll figure out what type of a contract Quinn Post is on. Um, and he's actually not showing up here.
what did you say?
He's not showing up for me actually on
Who?
Spotracs. Quinn Post. I don't know.
They might have honestly
He's
that they might
probably
have cut him, bro. I'm gonna keep it a buck
they could have cut him or they could have just outright put him on the G League roster, which I
because I'm
think is
looking at it
probably
right. I'm looking at it right now.
yeah, I would think they put him on the G League. Either way, I'll keep going. Jerome Robinson, not really good, pretty big draft bust. Uh, fringe NBA player. Lester Quinones, same thing, fringe NBA player. Usman Garuba actually didn't know was on this team last season, but he's kind of cool. But nothing crazy for them. He would have been a third big. And then the big one for them, in my opinion, is Chris Paul. Um, I think he's their biggest loss. Last season, he was really good for them organizing a lot of this stuff, especially with Curry not on the floor. Um, and yeah, just a really good basketball mind to have out there, even if he's not a great scorer at this point in his career. Um, yeah, anything on those losses?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on the Chris Paul front. We just talked about him, or we talked about him in the last episode. Um, but I mean, really good passer. He was six. I mean, it's 6.8, pretty much 7 assists on this team last year. I mean that's really good. Uh, he shot pretty good from 3 point line. Like I said, he knew how to fit his role. He took a lesser role offensively, stepped into a good playmaking role. It hurts when you lose that, but yeah, it hurts. It's
And
it's a
I think
it's
more
a stinging
importantly,
loss.
it puts more on Steph's plate, playmaking
Yep.
wise. You 6.8 assists last year. That was in somewhat limited playing time. Like that's probably like a per minute basis the highest in the Warriors system over the last 10 years. Like this has been a system that doesn't really generate a ton of assists for
Yeah.
individual players. Like as a team they generate a good bit, but one individual player getting 6.8 and was not too many minutes for Chris Paul. It's pretty impressive. Um, Yeah, that kind of does their off season. Well, just a couple lineup notes to make, and then we can talk about individual players. Um, quick, who do you think had the highest net rating on this team last season?
Kuminga. No, wait. Hold on. Ooh, man, this is hard. I'm gonna say Brandon. I'm gonna say Pradinsky.
Yeah, it was Brandon Pajemski at 6.5. Number
You
two
hear
is
me?
Draymond Green. Um,
Oh,
Steph
I have
Curry's
no. I
number
just
was a
missed
lot
all
lower
that.
this season. Yeah, you're right with Pods.
Oh, it was.
Yeah, Pods was number two. Curry,
Hey,
his numbers were a lot lower this season. Really weird Andrew Wiggins season, I think, is the big contributor there. Um, like, and Curry played a ton of minutes with Andrew Wiggins this year. Um, so that's the big reason. That's the big reason. The Curry Wiggins, like, they played a ton of minutes together, and that's the big reason why Curry's net rating wasn't very high this year. It was only 2.7, which, like, is still solid, but not very amazing. Draymond Green, interesting thing. They play a lot of Draymond at the five. When Draymond plays the four with other centers, with Trace Jackson Davis, he was plus 10.7. With Kevon Looney, he was minus 3.5. So this is telling you, and this was both in about 210, 220 minutes each. Um, this is telling you that the better fit there is definitely Trace Jackson Davis as a next to Draymond center. A lot of that is Trace Jackson Davis. He's not a great defender necessarily. Um, he's a really athletic lob threat, roll threat. That plays really well off of Draymond Green because even though Looney and Draymond can't shoot, and Trace Jackson Davis and Draymond can't shoot, the athleticism opens up a little bit of playmaking opportunity for Draymond. Draymond is a really good passer, so if you have something to play off of there, as a lob threat, as a in the dunker spot athlete, um, that allows you to play two non-shooting bigs. Um,
hmm.
Additionally, Trace Jackson Davis is a great screen setter. So is Looney, but Trace Jackson Davis, I think, is a little bit better as a roll man uh, in the pick and roll, which they found later in the season, I think, and he played a ton for them. Yeah, when he was on the floor too, Trace Jackson Davis had a 117.7 net rating. This was a team that wasn't a great defensive team, but they were better than that. 114 and a half overall. So they were a good bit worse with Trace Jackson Davis um, on the floor defensively. I think him and Draymond in the 200 minutes that they played together, their defensive rating was around 109. So clearly, Draymond, Trace Jackson Davis, it allows him to play more as a roamer. Um, Trace Jackson Davis, that is, because Draymond, or shit, it was 103.
Damn.
Yeah, that's crazy high. Also, the Steph and Draymond Green connection is still really strong um, at this point in the time. Steph plus Draymond was plus 6 this season. Draymond was plus 6. Steph was about plus 2 for this season. Um, yeah, Steph plus Draymond was plus 6. Uh, Steph, Draymond plus Kaminga was plus 13. So that was really good. And then Steph plus Kaminga was plus 6. So there's clearly not too much to be worried about with Draymond playing with another non-spacer. He works perfectly fine with Kaminga. He first works perfectly fine with Trace Jackson Davis. I'm interested actually now what it looks like with Kaminga, Trace Jackson. Okay, so they played 16 minutes with three of them, with those three.
16.
Yeah, all season. 16, Draymond, Trace Jackson Davis, and Kaminga. and it was minus 19.3.
Damn.
So that kind of affects what I was going to say for lineups because I don't know how much that works.
Wait.
Um,
Trace Jack. Okay, wow. Yeah, that might affect what I got to say too.
yeah, that really affects what I have to say. um, Pods I had mentioned was the highest net rating on this team. They talked about increasing his 3-point volume. In college, Pods was a 40. He shot 44% from three in his last college season on 6 attempts a game. This past season, he shot about 38.5% on what 4 attempts a game. Uh, let's see. It's not showing. 3 attempts a game. So like this is a clear example of this guy's volume definitely needs to be increased. His 3-point attempt rate this season was 40%. So like 40% of his shots were threes. In college, it was a good bit higher. It was about 60, or it was about 40% in his final season in college, but about 60% in his first season, where he was more of a role player. Clearly, this guy needs some, more shots. Specifically as a pull-up shooter, he seemed like a pretty good pull-up shooter um, in his time in the NBA. And this guy's just a great rebounder too. I think that needs to be said. He led his conference in rebounding his second season. Um,
He's
Overall,
a triple
go ahead.
double threat. I was just gonna say he's a triple double threat. Like realistically, because the passing's there. Like you said, rebounding is incredible. And also the scoring's there as well.
And last season, they really kind of let him do a lot playmaking wise. Um, they let him run a lot of the passer options in their like split, their split actions that they ran really frequently. It's like the staple of their offense. Um, yeah, last season his assist percentage was not that high. It was only 18%. Some of that has to do with not having good rollers out there with him. Some of that he was one of the better shooters. I'm interested. I don't know how much he played with Steph last year. Um, but his free throw rate was really low for a guy in college. It was about 31%. It was 18% this past, or 13% this past season. So you give him the ball more, he's gonna get rim attempts a lot more. He was a league average 3-point volume guy. Like this is a guy who's a good enough shooter to where he should be, you know, shooting them way more than the average player. So you double his minutes and then you give him more green light to shoot. I also really like his creation too. Like it's kind of weird, like it's clunky. Um, Really similar to like it's just kind of really similar to Brunson in the fact where
Yeah,
he's not a great athlete, but he'll step
he
around you,
is.
he'll slow down out of nowhere. Um, that's how I feel about his on-ball creation. I don't think it's as good as Brunson. I don't think he has as good of rim finishing as Brunson. I think that's a big issue there. I don't think he's as good of a mid-range scorer either, but like I think he has a good ability to create separation without being a great athlete. And I think shooting pull-up three-pointers next season should be a big part of his game. Um, and we can look forward at their depth chart. Um, they're they have Steph as their starting point guard. Um, they have no backup point guard until Pat Spencer and Reese Beekman. Pods is going to have to play some point guard next season, and he's going to have to initiate for them next year. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
you go ahead.
you don't think Melton can facilitate like that?
I don't think he can. I think he can pass a little bit, but I don't think he can create shots.
Yeah. That yeah. Then I think everything you say is pretty much accurate with Pods having, but I like Pods starting as well. So like I don't know how much
Yeah.
point guard he'll be able to play is my thing. Maybe since maybe Curry gets more minutes, then I don't know. We'll have to see.
Okay. I'm really interested with these starting lineups because it can go like a million different ways for me.
Yeah,
Um, Basically, in the starting lineup, to me, it comes down to are we starting Draymond and Kuminga or Draymond and Trace Jackson Davis?
yeah.
Um, yeah, go ahead.
I can see the situational maybe. Like if you have a too big lineup, you go to Trace Jackson Davis. If you have a center that's like I don't know, maybe 6'11", 6'10", 7 foot, you go to the small ball lineup. I think their best lineup is when they run that kind of small ball lineup, and Draymond Green is at the five. Uh, yeah, and then they have Kaminga,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, I this team we didn't mention it in the offseason because it didn't actually happen, but they really liked the idea of getting Markin in, but they were attached to pods. I think they had included Kaminga, Moody, and picks for Markin, and when knowing what we know about their lineup data, I could really see like Markkinen slotting at the four next to Draymond, um, being actually really good for them because then they can still start Kaminga if they wanted, or they can start Wiggins even if he doesn't develop as a shooter. Um, yeah, so
and I
starting
think
five,
Wiggins is past developing anything
yeah, they're like
at
just
this point
bouncing
in his
back.
career.
Yeah, bouncing back as a shooter because he had a
Yeah,
really down season shooting wise.
yeah.
Um,
After he just had
start,
a good season with them.
yeah, starting lineup wise, Steph, we
I
both
like
have.
Pod. I got
I
Pods.
like.
I got Pod
I
at
think. Yeah, I think Pods will start at the two. Um, but I think which both if Pods doesn't start at the two, or even if he does, I think he's going to play bench point guard for them. Yeah, I just don't see how that doesn't happen.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and then Wiggins, Kuminga, and Draymond, I think is what they'll do. Kuminga,
Yeah.
interestingly, him and Moody are both extension eligible right now. Um, I
Him
think
and
Kuminga,
Moody.
yeah, both of them are. I think Kuminga wanted he wants that rookie scale max.
Oh yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and like I don't think he's worth that, but
Man, I
I
think
don't
they need to give it to him, bro. I'm a keep. I'm high on Kaminga.
yeah
I just don't. I think Kerr doesn't know what to do with Kaminga is the problem,
I
and
think
he's not being used.
contrasting it to the Jalen Green Sengun conversations. I think Kuminga's closer to that level of player than those guys are.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just don't think he's really been given a true chance on the Warriors yet. Like, even though he's been
Mhm.
doing good, I think that I think he's I think he's better than what he's even showing us now. Is kind of how I'm looking at it. But
I agree. He's improved so much.
yeah,
His rookie season, he clearly just wasn't NBA quality. Um, like he didn't know the game. He didn't have an NBA handle. His shot was even worse than it is now.
hmm,
If he can develop as a shooter, honestly, like they could have a really interesting lineup. But the reason Kerr struggled with him, I think, is um, Draymond. If you can't start Draymond and Kaminga and then also start a center, so you have to commit
yeah,
to small ball from the start of the game, which I think is why Kerr struggled to throw out those lineups.
yep.
So this is one of the weirdest starting lineup situations I've honestly seen in a while. How much do you think Moody or not Moody Looney plays?
Man, I don't know. I can see him getting lost in this rotation a little bit. I'm not
I
gonna
think
lie.
so. I think
If Draymond plays five, like kind of like he did last, as much as he did last year, I don't really see. I don't know. I mean, Looney just hasn't really blossomed to anything like
mhm.
crazy. Like I don't know. I'm not really that high. I was very high on him earlier in his career. He just hasn't really panned out like I thought he would. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think he plays that much.
I think this is another similar to Memphis. I think this is a center by committee type of thing.
Okay.
I think probably 20 minutes a game, Trace Jackson Davis probably needs to be a little bit more actually, and then like 15 to Draymond, and then the rest to Kaminga or to Moody, Looney. Um, okay, so do we think Checks and Davis? I mean, we both think Kaminga should start.
Yeah,
Going off of our numbers, like it's either going to be Trace Jackson Davis or Kaminga, and we both think it
I I
should.
I put Kaminga in.
Yeah, so Draymond at the five, Kaminga at the four.
Yeah.
In that situation, at the three, would you rather play Melton or play Wiggins with Pods and Curry starting at the guards?
I'm gonna say start with Wiggins. Trust in Wiggins. Um, I think he's still he's a okay. Wait, hold up 1 second. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
still pretty good on defense. Pretty versatile still. Melton I think is a better defender, but I think Barnes gives you more on offense. Even if he did have a down year, I would stick with or not Barnes, sorry Wiggins. Um,
yeah,
I would stick with Wiggins at
yeah.
starting.
I'm just with two non-shooters, like it's really hard to put Wiggins in the lineup for me, um, especially when his main role last year was as a defender, and I think Melton can do that better on guards, right? And like Kaminga will guard your bigger forwards anyway, so I don't see why Wiggins is a need there. And at that point, like Pods is still a good rebounder, so you're not giving up like you're already giving up size with Draymond and Kaminga as your front court, so like Pods kind of needs to be your like he's there to rebound the ball. I don't know. It's such a weird clashing of styles here. On the bench, um, bench, we kind of said that Looney might get lost, but he should still play a little bit. Um, between Moody, Heald, Payton, Anderson, who do we think plays the most?
Anderson.
I kind of agree.
Yeah,
Um,
I think Anderson.
they need that size. They're going to need him somewhere. Draymond next to Kyle Anderson could be kind of cool too. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and get to offensive MVP, X Factor, defensive MVP for them. So like offensive MVP, I think we both have Stephen Curry.
Yep.
Yeah. It's gonna be hard to. We don't have to really explain that one. Defensive
Yeah.
MVP, it's still Draymond Green for me. Like he's so good out there. He's just really good out there defensively. And he rotates perfectly almost every play. Really good vertical contester for a guy who's 6'6".
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's the anchor of this defense. Every time it cuts to him when the other team's coming up the floor, he's barking out orders. Um, this defense wouldn't be any good without Draymond. So I think Draymond, because not only individually he's a good defender, but he also helps the team in that aspect.
An amazing team defender, like all-time great team defender.
Yeah.
Um, and then X Factor, I'll go ahead and go mine first. For me, it's Kaminga, just because, like I mentioned, how good the Curry, Draymond, and Kaminga lineups were, and the Draymond and Trace Jackson Davis lineups were also so good. So if Kaminga can develop as a shooter, then suddenly you don't have to worry about that entire conversation we just had with Wiggins and Melton. Like you can just straight up start Kuminga at the three, and then start Jackson Davis and Draymond. You don't have to worry about giving up size. That's just if Kuminga takes a step forward as a shooter next season. I actually don't know what his shooting percentages were last season, but
I got
um,
you. He shot 53% from the field, 32% from the three.
yeah. So like even he definitely still needs to get more attempts up, but if he can get the percentage to around 36, 37,
Yeah,
like then you can legitimately run a starting lineup of Curry Potts, Kaminga, Draymond, and Trace Jackson Davis. So I think that's why he's my X factor from them. Even though I think Potts will take the biggest step forward this year. Who'd you
yeah.
have it at?
Oh, for X Factor. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I like Pods. Um, if I mean, I think in my opinion, he's replacing Klay Thompson. Um, just because they said they want him to shoot eight to 10 field goals per game or whatever it was from 3 point line. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if he does that, he's gonna have to be able to convert on those, right? He can't go out there and shoot 30% if he's shooting eight a game. Um, I think that he's gonna be a huge part of this offense. Sneakily behind Curry, obviously. Um, I mean, I think you're looking at the second. You're looking at a possible second scoring option right now. On the
Yeah.
Warriors. I
Last
mean,
season
unless
he
you go to
averaged
Kaminga, like who
yeah.
was your X factor? So
Yeah, last season he averaged 9, 6, and 4. I would not be surprised if that goes to like 17, 8, and 6. And like he's gonna be shooting so much more. I think his statistical I think last season he was already better than Klay Thompson. And like Warriors fans kind of thought that at the end of the year. Like they were like, hey, he should be starting. But um, obviously you didn't want to bench Klay Thompson. So I don't know. I don't think he's gonna be that much better than he was last season. Like I think he was already just as good as he is. I think he just needs more volume. Is really what it is.
yeah, and let's not forget, this guy, like you said, is not only a 3 point shooter. This guy is an incredible rebounder, um, and he can also play make. He had 3 assists last year. So I mean, I think this this probably oh, was Jaime Jaquez in the draft last year too.
Hmm.
Damn.
What were you gonna say
I,
though?
I was gonna say he was he was a second round. Was he a first round pick?
He was a late first.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think he was like one of the sneaky
I
steals
think
of the
he was the
draft.
steal of the draft. I think
Okay.
that,
Yeah. I, but I mean, Jaime Jaquez is probably the only other guy I would say because I mean he kind of burst onto the scene too this
well,
year.
yeah. I'll say this: I had both of those guys as top 5 players in their draft. In this
Okay.
draft, like not predicting because that would have been crazy prediction, and I should get millions of dollars for those predictions. But like, if I'm evaluating that draft right now, those are top 5 guys in that draft for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I don't think that's ridiculous.
So yeah, Pods and Hawkins are fire. Do we think this team got better compared to last season's team?
Ooh, man. I don't know.
I'll go first because
Yeah,
I
you
think
go
yes.
first. Mm.
And let me lay this
Okay,
out.
question.
Okay,
Is it do you think they got better by just a little bit or you think you think it's pretty
I think it's. Let me put it this way: Melton. I think at this point in their careers, Melton and Heald are like really similar shooters to Clay. I
okay.
think giving Pods the ball more, like I think Pods is already a better offensive and defensive player than Clay, and he's going to be playing more. Um, just empowering him to do that, I think, is a lot better. Anderson, like, literally is replacing nobody from last year's team, really.
Yeah.
So, like, that's just a straight up addition. Um, Melton, better perimeter defender than Clay. Anderson, a better non perimeter defender, a better help defender, and a better big man defender than Klay Thompson. Hield a great shooter. Chris Paul's the big loss that I mentioned before, but and like they are going to be kind of playmaking deficient, but I think that's really just assuming Pods can take a step forward as a passer, and like he only averaged 4 assists a game last season, but like this guy, he had a lot of interesting uh, passing flashes last year, even if the numbers I think were 18% assist rate and then 10% turnover rate, which like is okay, but like I think he's a much better passer than even that indicated just from watching the film.
I agree.
That's why I come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think they got better. I Chris Paul hurts the playmaking, but you get Pods, which I think we both agree is much better playmaker than advertised. Again, Klay Thompson to me hurts. I think that he was just given too much of a role at this point of his career, but I agree with you on Melton gives you the defense that Klay obviously didn't have.
Yeah, that you
Um,
needed out of play.
yeah, that you needed out of Klay and you never got. And he also had a lot of energy. And Buddy Hield, I think, is probably a better shooter at this point of his career than Klay Thompson, just off a straight shooting standpoint. Um, but man, it's weird. Like no Klay Thompson. I still haven't
But
really.
at this
But
point in their careers, I think he's the worst of those three guys that they Dre and Curry include. So
you said Klay's the worst right now
of
out of
of Clay and Draymond and Curry.
yeah, yeah. That yeah, no doubt. No doubt
He's the
about
one that
that.
really want to lose.
I mean,
Um,
Draymond, and I think Draymond and Curry, or I know Curry's still at the top of his game. I think Draymond's still. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see
he,
what we talk about in the power
he's
forward ranking.
90% of what he was in 2022. I think
Yeah,
Clay is like even in 2022 he really wasn't that good, but in 2022 he was still like 50% better than he is
yeah,
now.
yeah. No, I agree with you. Klay Thompson is not what he used to be. Obviously, that's why they blew it up. I do think he's going to do great things in Dallas, but they got better.
Yeah, I mean that's why he signed for 11 million a season in Dallas. Or not 11, 14, whatever. That's why he signed for that number.
Yeah.
Any closing comments before we wrap this one up?
Nah, nah. I don't got anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
should be an interesting team when we rank in the episode. The full West episode will be after the Sacramento Kings episode. We will see you in the next episode, which should be the Los Angeles Clippers. Yeah, we'll see you guys then.